The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's emergency room buzzed overhead at 2:30 in the morning, casting harsh shadows across the waiting area. Maya Henderson rushed through the automatic doors, her 8-year-old son Malik limp in her arms, his small body burning with fever and shaking with violent tremors. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps that made her heart race with terror. "Please, someone help us!" Maya called out, her voice breaking with panic as she approached the reception desk. The head nurse, a middle-aged white woman with steel-grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read Karen Matthews, and her cold blue eyes swept over Maya with undisguised disdain, taking in her worn jeans, faded sweater, and the way she clutched her sick child. "The waiting room is over there," Karen said flatly, pointing toward a row of plastic chairs without looking up from her screen. "We can't serve people like you at this hour." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "My son is having seizures. He's burning up with fever. Please, he needs help right now." Karen finally looked up, her expression hardening. "Do you have insurance? Can you pay for treatment? Or are you just another welfare case looking for a handout?" The words hit Maya like physical blows. Around the waiting room, other patients and their families turned to stare. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, while others nodded in agreement with Karen's harsh assessment. Maya felt their judgment burning into her skin. "I have Medicaid," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, my son is really sick." Karen scoffed and gestured toward the security guard, a burly man who immediately began walking in their direction. "We're not a charity hospital. Take your son to the county facility. They deal with your kind there." As the security guard approached, Maya backed toward the door, tears streaming down her face. Malik whimpered in her arms, his small hand clutching weakly at her sweater. "Please," she tried one more time. "He's just a little boy." But the doors were already sliding shut behind them as they were escorted out into the cold night rain. As Maya hurried toward her old Honda Civic, she whispered to herself, "I once saved a man's life in a snowstorm. Maybe he's forgotten." In her pocket, her old phone still held a contact saved 3 years ago. "Mr. Alexander, the man I saved." Maya Henderson was 36 years old, a single mother who had learned to carry the world on her shoulders without letting it show in front of her son. She had started pre-med at the local community college years ago, dreaming of becoming a nurse, but life had other plans when Malik arrived. Now she worked multiple part-time jobs, cleaning houses for wealthy families in the suburbs, caring for elderly residents at a nursing home, and selling handmade crafts online during the late-night hours when Malik slept. Their small 2-bedroom apartment in the older part of town was clean but sparse, furnished with second-hand finds from thrift stores and garage sales. Every dollar Maya earned went toward Malik's asthma medications, her mother's cancer treatments, or the small college fund she had been building penny by penny for 8 years. Malik was the light of Maya's world, a bright boy with curious eyes who asked endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how doctors helped people feel better. Despite his chronic asthma, he dreamed of becoming a doctor someday, often pretending to examine his stuffed animals with a toy stethoscope Maya had found at a yard sale. "When I grow up, I'm going to help sick kids like me," he would tell Maya, his young face serious with determination. Maya's mother, Rosa Henderson, was 65 and fighting stage 3 breast cancer. She had spent 40 years as a janitor at various hospitals around the city, working night shifts to support Maya after her father left when Maya was 12. Rosa had taught Maya everything she knew about basic first aid and emergency care during those long hours she spent at the hospital as a child, waiting for her mother to finish work. "Baby girl," Rosa would say during her chemotherapy sessions, "kindness is the only thing in this world that nobody can take away from you. No matter how hard life gets, you keep that heart of yours soft." Maya carried Rosa's old leather purse everywhere, a battered brown bag that contained not just Maya's wallet and keys, but also a small first aid kit that Rosa had assembled over the years. Inside were bandages, antiseptic wipes, a small flashlight, and a laminated card with emergency medical procedures that Rosa had copied from her hospital training manuals decades ago. 3 years earlier, on a night when the worst snowstorm in 20 years had blanketed the city, Maya had been driving home after a double shift caring for Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose family lived overseas. The snow was falling so heavily that Maya could barely see the road ahead, her windshield wipers struggling against the thick white curtain. That's when she saw the luxury sedan overturned in the drainage ditch beside the highway, its headlights cutting eerie angles through the storm. Maya pulled over immediately, grabbing Rosa's first aid kit from her purse as she ran toward the wreckage. The driver was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. His expensive suit was torn, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Maya didn't hesitate. She had learned enough from Rosa and her own truncated medical studies to know that head injuries and hypothermia were both life-threatening in these conditions. Working quickly, she used her scarf to apply pressure to his head wound, then covered him with her own winter coat to prevent shock. She called 911 on her phone, staying on the line with the dispatcher while using her flashlight to check his pulse and breathing. When the man briefly regained consciousness just as the ambulance arrived, his eyes focused on Maya's face with startling clarity. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice weak but sincere. "I will never forget this kindness." Before the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, he pressed a business card into Maya's hand. "Please call me. I owe you everything." Maya had looked at the card. Expensive stock paper with elegant embossed lettering that read, "Alexander Morgenstein, Chairman, Morgenstein Medical Group." But she had assumed it was just polite gratitude. She saved the number in her phone but never called, thinking it would be presumptuous to contact a stranger just because she had done what any decent person would do. Now, 3 years later, Maya lived in the same modest apartment, drove the same 15-year-old Honda Civic, and shopped for groceries with coupons clipped from the Sunday paper. Her neighbors in the building knew her as the quiet woman who always held the elevator for elderly residents and who had organized a meal train when Mr. Rodriguez on the 3rd floor had his heart attack. To the outside world, Maya was invisible. Just another single black mother struggling to get by in a system that seemed designed to keep people like her at the margins. But those who knew her understood that beneath her humble exterior was a strength forged by years of putting others' needs before her own, and a compassion that had never been dimmed by hardship. By 4 in the morning, Maya had driven 30 minutes through the rain to University General Hospital, a public facility where she hoped Malik might receive the care he desperately needed. Her son's condition had worsened during the drive, his fever spiking higher and his breathing becoming more labored with each passing minute. Dr. David Washington, a young black physician in his early 30s, was working the overnight shift when Maya burst through the emergency room doors. He immediately recognized the signs of severe respiratory distress and began triaging Malik without hesitation. "Ma'am, I'm Dr. Washington. Let's get your son into exam room 3 right away," he said, his voice calm but urgent as he helped Maya place Malik on a gurney. "How long has he been like this?" "Since yesterday evening, but it got much worse around midnight," Maya replied, her hands shaking as she watched Dr. Washington examine her son. "He has asthma, but I've never seen him this bad." Dr. Washington was already reaching for oxygen equipment when a familiar voice cut through the emergency room like a knife. "Dr. Washington, what do we have here?" Maya's blood turned to ice as she recognized Karen Matthews walking toward them, her white uniform crisp despite having worked a double shift between hospitals. The woman's cold blue eyes locked onto Maya's face with obvious recognition and displeasure. "Nurse Matthews," Dr. Washington said professionally. 8-year-old male with severe asthma exacerbation, possible status asthmaticus. I'm starting nebulizer treatment and, Doctor, I need to speak with you privately. Karen interrupted, her tone leaving no room for discussion. Maya watched helplessly as Karen pulled Dr. Washington aside, their conversation conducted in low, urgent whispers just out of earshot. She could see Dr. Washington's expression changing from confusion to concern to barely controlled anger as Karen spoke. When they returned to Malik's bedside, Karen's face wore a satisfied smile that made Maya's stomach churn with dread. "To Washington," Karen announced loudly enough for other patients and staff to hear. "This patient was already refused treatment at St. Mary's earlier tonight due to inability to pay. We need to consider our resource allocation carefully. The child needs immediate medical attention." De Washington replied firmly, his jaw clenched with suppressed fury. "His ability to pay is irrelevant." Karen's smile widened. "Doctor, I think you're forgetting that this is a private hospital with financial obligations. We can't afford to provide free care to every welfare case that walks through our doors." The words, welfare case, hung in the air like poison. Maya felt the familiar burn of shame and anger, but this time it was mixed with desperate fear as she watched her son's lips growing paler on the gurney. At that moment, the automatic doors burst open and Hospital Administrator Jonathan Wright strode in, his expensive suit and polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. Wright was a man in his mid-50s who had built his career on hospital efficiency and profit margins, and his presence immediately shifted the power dynamic in the room. "Mr. Wright," Karen called out sweetly, "I was just explaining to Dr. Washington our policies regarding uninsured patients." Wright approached Maya's gurney, his cold grey eyes appraising the situation with calculating precision. "Dr. Washington, I understand we have a situation here." "Yes, sir. This child needs immediate treatment for severe asthma." "Does the patient have adequate insurance coverage?" Wright interrupted, not even glancing at Malik's struggling form. Maya found her voice. "I have Medicaid. My son needs help. Please." Wright's expression soured. "Medicaid reimbursement barely covers our costs. Dr. Washington, we've discussed this before. We must prioritize patients who can actually pay for their care." "Sir, with all due respect, this is a medical emergency. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't include a financial means test." Wright's face hardened. "Doctor, your idealism is admirable but impractical. This is a business, not a charity. If you continue to undermine hospital policy, we'll need to review your employment status." The threat hung heavy in the air as more patients and families gathered in the waiting area, drawn by the raised voices and obvious tension. Maya felt their stares like physical weight, some sympathetic, others judgmental, all making her feel exposed and vulnerable. Karen seized the moment to twist the knife deeper. "Some people," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "think they can just show up at any hospital and demand free care. They take advantage of the system and expect hard-working taxpayers to foot the bill." An elderly white couple sitting nearby nodded in agreement, while a Hispanic family with their own sick child looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Maya felt completely alone in a room full of people. Malik stirred on the gurney, his voice barely a whisper. "Mama, why are they being mean to you?" The question shattered something inside Maya's chest. Her 8-year-old son, struggling to breathe, was worried about her feelings instead of his own pain. She leaned down to stroke his forehead, tears dropping onto his fevered cheek. "Don't worry, baby. Mama's gonna make sure you're okay." But even as she spoke the words, Maya wasn't sure how she could keep that promise. Dr. Washington, meanwhile, was refusing to back down. "I took an oath to do no harm, and I won't abandon a child who needs medical care. I don't care what the financial implications are." Wright's eyes flashed with anger. "Security!" he called out sharply. 2 security guards appeared almost immediately, as if they had been waiting for the command. "Dr. Washington has violated hospital protocol and is being suspended from duty effective immediately." Wright announced. "Escort him from the premises." The guards moved toward Dr. Washington, who held up his hands but didn't resist. "This is wrong, and you know it. I'll be reporting this to the State Medical Board. Go ahead and report it." Wright replied coldly. "See who they believe, a respected hospital administrator or some hothead who can't follow simple policies." Karen laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Birds of a feather flock together, don't they? I suppose you people always stick together." The racial implication was unmistakable and sent a ripple of uncomfortable murmurs through the waiting room. Dr. Washington's hands clenched into fists, but he maintained his dignity as the security guards flanked him. "Maya," he said quietly, "don't give up. Keep fighting for your son." As Dr. Washington was escorted away, Wright turned back to Maya with barely concealed contempt. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we cannot provide treatment for your son at this time. I suggest you try the county hospital across town." Maya's desperation reached a breaking point. "Please, I'm begging you. My son is dying. I'll do anything. I'll clean your hospital for free. I'll work off the debt. Just please don't let my baby die." Wright's expression didn't soften. "Security will escort you out. Have a good evening." The same guards who had just removed Dr. Washington now turned their attention to Maya and Malik. The lead guard, a large man with kind eyes who looked uncomfortable with his assignment, approached the gurney reluctantly. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you need to come with us." Maya gathered Malik in her arms, his weight seeming both impossibly heavy and heartbreakingly light. As she was escorted through the waiting room, she heard Karen's voice one final time. "Some people need to learn that healthcare isn't a right. It's a privilege you have to earn." The automatic doors slid shut behind them, leaving Maya and Malik alone in the hospital parking lot as rain began falling again. Malik's breathing was becoming increasingly labored, and Maya could feel his small body growing weaker in her arms. She called 911 from her phone, but the dispatcher told her the nearest ambulance was 20 minutes away due to multiple accidents caused by the storm. 20 minutes felt like an eternity when her son was struggling for every breath. In that moment of absolute desperation, Maya remembered the business card that had been sitting in her phone for 3 years. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, finding the number she had never dared to call. "Please, God," she whispered as the phone rang. "Let him remember me." The phone rang twice before a voice answered, cultured, alert despite the early hour, and immediately warm with recognition. "Maya? Maya Henderson?" She nearly dropped the phone in shock. You remember me?" "My dear girl, I think about you every single day. You saved my life in that snowstorm. What's wrong? You sound upset." Through her tears, Maya poured out the story. Malik's condition, the rejections at both hospitals, the cruelty they had endured. Alexander Morgenstein listened in complete silence until she finished. When he finally spoke, his voice had transformed from warm to ice-cold steel. "Which hospital did you say this was?" "University General. But Mr. Morgenstein, I don't want to cause trouble. I just need help for my son." "Maya, listen to me very carefully. Take Malik back inside that hospital immediately. Tell them Alexander Morgenstein is on his way, and that I want your son treated by the best doctors available. Do you understand?" "I don't understand. Who are you exactly?" There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Maya, I own University General Hospital. I own St. Mary's. I own 47 other hospitals across this country. And the people who hurt you tonight are about to learn what happens when you mistreat my guardian angel." Maya's world tilted on its axis. The man whose life she had saved 3 years ago, the stranger she had pulled from a wrecked car without asking his name or expecting anything in return, was one of the most powerful men in American healthcare. "I'll be there in 10 minutes with my medical team," Alexander continued, his voice now commanding and decisive. "First, We save your son. Then we deal with the people who dared to refuse treatment to the woman who saved my life." True to his word, exactly 10 minutes later, a convoy of black luxury vehicles pulled up in front of University General Hospital. Alexander Morgenstein stepped out of the lead car, followed by a team of doctors in expensive suits and a group of serious-looking men and women carrying leather briefcases. At 73, Alexander was an imposing figure, tall and distinguished, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. His presence commanded immediate attention as he strode through the hospital's automatic doors like a man who owned the place, which, Maya was beginning to understand, he literally did. He spotted Maya immediately, still holding Malik in the waiting room, where security had reluctantly allowed her to sit after she mentioned his name. Alexander's expression softened completely as he approached them. "My brave girl," he said gently, kneeling down beside Maya's chair. "And this must be your son." He looked at Malik with the tender expression of a grandfather, then immediately turned to his medical team. "Dr. Ramirez, Dr. Chen, I want the best pediatric emergency care for this child right now. Spare no expense. Use every resource this hospital has. This boy's mother saved my life, and now we're going to save his." The team sprang into action with military precision. Within minutes, Malik was surrounded by the finest pediatric specialists in the city, receiving treatments that the previous medical staff had deemed too expensive for a Medicaid patient. As oxygen flowed into Malik's lungs and his breathing began to stabilize, Alexander turned his attention to the administrative side of the situation. "Now," he said, his voice carrying easily across the emergency room, "I want to speak with Jonathan Wright and Karen Matthews immediately." A nurse scurried away to find them while Alexander waited, his presence filling the space with an energy that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. When Wright appeared, confident and dismissive until he saw who was waiting for him, the power dynamic shifted completely. "Mr. Morgenstein," Wright said, his voice higher than usual. "What a surprise. If I had known you were—" "Quiet," Alexander said simply, and Wright's mouth snapped shut. "I want you to meet someone very special to me." He placed a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. "This is Maya Henderson. 3 years ago, she pulled me from an overturned car in a snowstorm and saved my life. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for identification or proof of insurance. She just saw another human being who needed help, and she acted." Wright's face had gone pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, despite the hospital's air conditioning. Karen Matthews appeared at that moment, her confident stride faltering when she saw the assembled crowd, and recognized the man at its center. "Ah, Nurse Matthews," Alexander said, his tone conversational, but carrying an undercurrent that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "I understand you've met my dear friend Maya before tonight." Karen's mouth opened and closed without sound, her usual sharp tongue apparently paralyzed by the situation. "Tell me," Alexander continued, "what exactly did you say to the woman who saved my life when she brought her dying son here for help?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Around them, other patients and staff had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation unfold. Several people had their phones out, recording what was clearly going to be a significant moment. Wright found his voice first, attempting damage control. "Mr. Morgenstein, there must be some misunderstanding. We have policies about financial verification that apply to all patients." "Policies," Alexander repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "Tell me about these policies that allow you to call a child's mother welfare case in public. Explain the policy that permits you to mock a woman's race while her son struggles to breathe." Wright's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Sir, if there were any inappropriate comments made—" "Inappropriate." Alexander's voice rose slightly, and the single word carried more authority than Wright's entire career. Is that what you call it when you tell a mother that her child doesn't deserve medical care because of the color of their skin? The emergency room had filled with an unusual crowd as word spread through the hospital that something extraordinary was happening. Doctors, nurses, administrators, patients, and family members had all found reasons to be within earshot of the confrontation unfolding near the central nurses' station. Alexander Morgenstein stood at the center of it all, his commanding presence turning the medical facility into his personal courtroom. Maya sat nearby, holding Malik, who was now breathing normally thanks to the excellent care provided by Alexander's hand-picked medical team. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander announced, his voice carrying easily across the crowded space, "I want everyone here to witness what happens next. My name is Alexander Morgenstein, and I am the owner and chairman of this hospital, along with 46 others across the United States." A murmur rippled through the crowd as people pulled out their phones to capture what was clearly about to become a historic moment. Wright, his face now ashen, attempted one final play for sympathy. "Mr. Morgenstein, I have a family to support, children who depend on me. If you terminate my employment over what was simply a policy misunderstanding—" Alexander cut him off with a raised hand. "You want to talk about family? Tonight you looked a mother in the eye and told her that her child's life wasn't worth saving because she couldn't pay enough money. You took an oath to serve the sick and injured, and instead you used your position to humiliate and dehumanize a woman whose only crime was being poor." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "But that woman, Mr. Wright, is the reason I'm alive today. 3 years ago, Maya Henderson could have driven past an overturned car in a blizzard. She could have decided it wasn't her problem, that helping a stranger wasn't worth the risk. Instead, she stopped, pulled me from that wreck, administered first aid, and stayed with me until help arrived." Maya found herself holding her breath as Alexander's voice grew stronger and more passionate. "She didn't check my credit score first. She didn't ask to see my insurance card. She saw a human being in need of help, and she acted with the kind of compassion that you have apparently forgotten exists." Alexander turned his attention to Karen Matthews, who had been standing frozen throughout the speech. "And you, Nurse Matthews, you called this woman people like her and suggested she was looking for handouts. You mocked her race and her circumstances in front of a room full of strangers while her child was dying in her arms." Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I was just following protocol." "We have to check insurance status." "Protocol!" Alexander's voice rose again, filling the room with righteous anger. "What protocol requires you to be cruel? What policy manual tells you to strip away a parent's dignity while their child suffers?" He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "Maya Henderson taught me something that night in the snow. She showed me that true strength isn't about having power over others. It's about using whatever power you have to help those who can't help themselves." Alexander walked over to Maya, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This woman asked for nothing in return for saving my life. She never called to ask for favors or money. She just went home, took care of her family, and continued living her life with the same quiet dignity and compassion she showed me that night." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to Alexander's words. But for the first time that evening, they weren't tears of despair or humiliation. "Today," Alexander continued, "I learned that the woman who saved my life has been working multiple jobs to support her son and care for her elderly mother who is fighting cancer. She lives in a modest apartment, drives an old car, and shops with coupons. But she has something that all the money in the world can't buy, a heart that sees the humanity in every person she meets." He turned back to Wright and Karen, his expression hardening. "You two looked at that same woman and saw only someone to be dismissed and degraded. You saw her race and her economic status and decided she was unworthy of basic human decency, let alone medical care. Wright made one last desperate attempt to save his career. Sir, you have to understand the financial pressures we face. Medicaid reimbursements are low, and we have to make difficult decisions about resource allocation. Stop! Alexander commanded, his voice cutting through Wright's excuses like a blade. Just stop. He looked around the room again, ensuring he had everyone's attention. Effective immediately, Jonathan Wright is terminated from his position as hospital administrator. He is banned from working in any facility within the Morgenstein Medical Group, and I will personally ensure that his actions tonight are reported to every major healthcare network in the country. Wright's face crumpled as the full impact of his situation became clear. In a business where reputation was everything, Alexander Morgenstein's word carried enough weight to end his career permanently. Karen Matthews, Alexander continued, you are terminated as well. I am also recommending to the State Board of Nursing that your license be revoked for conduct unbecoming a healthcare professional. Karen began crying, her previous arrogance completely evaporated. Please, I need this job. I have bills, I have responsibilities. So did the single mother you humiliated tonight, Alexander replied without sympathy. The difference is that she faced her responsibilities with grace and dignity, while you chose cruelty and prejudice. He gestured toward Dr. Washington, who had been quietly observing from the back of the crowd after being readmitted to the hospital by Alexander's security team. Honor to David Washington is hereby promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine, with a salary increase of 100% and full administrative authority to implement new protocols that ensure every patient receives dignified, compassionate care regardless of their ability to pay. Dr. Washington stepped forward, his expression serious but grateful. Thank you, Mr. Morgenstein. I won't let you down. You already proved yourself tonight when you stood up for what was right, even when it cost you your job, Alexander replied. He returned his attention to the crowd, his voice carrying a tone of finality that resonated throughout the room. Let me be very clear about something. Maya Henderson didn't save my life because she knew I was wealthy. She saved my life because that's who she is, a woman who sees suffering and instinctively moves to heal it. Tonight, I've been given the opportunity to honor that same principle. Alexander looked directly at Maya, his eyes bright with emotion. You taught me that real power isn't about what you can take from people. It's about what you can give to them. You showed me that dignity and compassion aren't luxuries reserved for the wealthy. They're basic human rights that everyone deserves. He raised his voice one final time, addressing everyone in the room. From this day forward, any employee in any Morgenstein medical facility who treats a patient with anything less than complete respect and dignity will find themselves looking for work elsewhere. Healthcare is not a privilege to be earned. It is a basic human right to be honored. Maya stood up slowly, still holding Malik, who was now alert and breathing normally. She looked at Alexander with tears in her eyes, but her voice was strong and clear when she spoke. Mr. Morgenstein, what I did that night wasn't special. Any decent person would have stopped to help someone in need. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was right. Alexander smiled, the expression transforming his face from stern authority to grandfatherly warmth. And that, my dear Maya, is exactly why what happened here tonight was so necessary. You see goodness as ordinary because that's who you are. But in a world where people like Mr. Wright and Ms. Matthews can reach positions of power, your kind of ordinary goodness becomes extraordinary. As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached Maya to shake her hand or simply say, "Thank you." The story would be online within hours, shared millions of times across social media with the hashtag #MayasKindness trending worldwide. But for Maya, none of that mattered as much as the sight of her son breathing easily in her arms, and the knowledge that no other parent would have to endure what she had experienced that night. 6 months later, Maya Henderson stood at the podium in the main auditorium of what had been University General Hospital, now renamed Rosa Henderson Memorial Medical Center in honor of her mother, who had passed away peacefully 2 months earlier. The room was packed with medical students, hospital staff, community leaders, and families from across the city who had come to hear her speak at the dedication ceremony. Maya had turned down Alexander's initial offer to become the chief medical officer of his entire hospital network, explaining that she wasn't qualified for such a position and that her real calling was direct patient care. Instead, she had accepted a role as Director of Community Outreach, overseeing 5 new free clinics that Alexander had opened in underserved neighborhoods throughout the city. "When I stopped to help a stranger 3 years ago," Maya began, her voice steady and clear, "I wasn't thinking about changing the world. I was just thinking about one person who needed help." In the front row, Alexander Morgenstein listened with tears in his eyes, while Malik, now healthy and thriving in the 4th grade, sat beside him, still dreaming of becoming a doctor someday. "My mother, Rosa Henderson, worked in hospitals for 40 years. Maya continued. "She cleaned floors, emptied trash cans, and changed bed linens. But she taught me that every person who walks through a hospital door is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's whole world." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. 3 years ago, I learned that one act of kindness can change a life. 6 months ago, I learned that one act of cruelty can change a life too. The difference is that kindness creates more kindness, while cruelty only destroys. Maya paused, looking out over the crowd of faces, white and black and brown and Asian, young and old, rich and poor, all united in this moment. "I want to tell you about the letter I received last week from a young nursing student named Jessica. She wrote to tell me that she had been in the emergency room that night 6 months ago. She watched everything that happened, and she said it made her ashamed of the profession she was entering." Maya pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. "But then Jessica wrote this. Seeing how you handled yourself with such dignity in the face of such cruelty, and seeing how Mr. Morgenstein used his power to defend what was right instead of what was convenient, made me realize that healthcare can be different. I want to be the kind of nurse who sees every patient as someone deserving of respect and compassion." Maya folded the letter and looked up at the audience. "That's why we're here today. Not because I'm anyone special, but because every single person in this room has the power to choose kindness over cruelty, dignity over prejudice, healing over harm." She gestured toward the bronze plaque that would be mounted in the hospital's main entrance, inscribed with Rosa's favorite saying, "Kindness is the only thing in this world that nobody can take away from you." My mother taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything. She taught me that when we lift others up, we all rise together. Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Today, this hospital represents more than just medical care. It represents the idea that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of the color of their skin, the size of their bank account, or the circumstances of their birth." Alexander stood up and began applauding, followed immediately by the rest of the audience. The ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes, with people wiping away tears and embracing strangers. When the room finally quieted, Maya spoke her final words. "I want to challenge everyone here to carry my mother's message forward. Look for opportunities to show kindness, especially to those who society tells you don't deserve it. Use whatever power you have, whether it's billions of dollars or just a smile and a kind word, to make someone else's life a little bit better." She looked directly at Alexander, then at Malik, then out over the crowd. "Because the truth is, we're all just walking each other home. And the journey is so much better when we choose to be kind along the way." After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the hospital atrium, Maya found a quiet moment with Alexander near the memorial wall that honored Rosa's memory. "I still can't believe all this happened," she said softly. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that night in the snow." Alexander smiled, placing a paternal hand on her shoulder. "My dear Maya, you didn't just save my life that night. You saved my soul. I had spent 70 years accumulating wealth and power, but I had forgotten why any of it mattered." He gestured toward the bustling hospital around them, where patients of all backgrounds were receiving world-class care, regardless of their ability to pay. "You reminded me that real success isn't measured by what you can buy. It's measured by what you can give. And the most precious thing any of us can give is the simple recognition that every person we meet is worthy of dignity and respect." Malik ran up to them, his face bright with excitement. "Mama, Dr. Washington says when I get older, I can volunteer here. I want to help sick kids like you helped Mr. Alexander." Maya knelt down to hug her son, her heart full of pride and hope. "That sounds perfect, baby. You're going to be an amazing doctor someday." As the sun set over the city, casting golden light through the hospital's windows, Maya thought about her mother's words. "Kindness is the only thing in this world that nobody can take away from you." Rosa had been right. In a world that often felt divided by hatred and prejudice, kindness remained the one force powerful enough to bridge any gap, heal any wound, and transform any heart willing to receive it. 6 months after that terrible night in the emergency room, Maya Henderson had learned that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change the world in ways we never imagine. And sometimes, when we choose to see the humanity in others, we discover the best parts of ourselves. The story of Maya and Alexander would be shared countless times in the years that came, inspiring others to look for opportunities to show kindness to strangers, to stand up against injustice, and to use whatever power they possessed to make the world a little bit better for everyone. But for Maya, the most important part wasn't the fame, or the recognition, or even the changes that had been made to the healthcare system. The most important part was knowing that her mother's legacy, a legacy of kindness, dignity, and service to others, would live on through her, through Malik, and through every person who chose compassion over cruelty. As they walked toward the hospital exit together, Alexander asked Maya one final question. "Do you ever regret stopping that night?" Maya looked back at the hospital named in her mother's honor, at the place where dozens of families were receiving care without judgment or discrimination, at the symbol of what was possible when people chose to be kind. "Never," she said simply. "Kindness always finds a way to come back to us. It just took 3 years to make the full circle." And with that, Maya Henderson, daughter, mother, and guardian angel, walked into the evening light, ready to continue changing the world one act of kindness at a time.